All right. Hello and welcome back, everyone. This is Ben Chiriboga, the Chief Growth Officer here at Nexl, coming to you with another This Legal Life. I am very, very excited to be sitting down with Mari Cruz Taboada. Mari, how are you today?
Hi, Ben. Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you for being here. So, Mari, we've been circling each other for a while. Those who know you probably know you as a top tier consultant with Lexington, but and I've known you through colleagues, Stephen Ravel, and various other colleagues. It's really exciting to be speaking to you right now and having this one-to-one. The first time we ever met, we're speaking on a podcast, but we both exist in the world of business of law on a day-to-day basis. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background. Who is Mari Cruz?
Thank you. So it's funny, we exist on the business of law. I kind of think that my life has been the business of law. I don't remember any other life pretty much. Maybe I was born on the business of law. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
So I studied law, and I'm one of these people that finished the degree and is like, do I want to practice law? No. And I actually specialized on mediation, dispute resolution. And it's interesting because in a way it's already looking at differences in a different perspective. Yeah. So from there I spent 8-9 years dealing with disputes, mostly was labor disputes. And I think that taught me pretty much everything you need to know about life, because if you can manage disputes, you can manage anything. Yeah. Then I had the opportunity to set up a business. I think the majority or some of us, we have this entrepreneurial spirit, and set up a company. Run the company, was also on the business of law, but more observing from a communication perspective, from research, from market intelligence, mostly focused in Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. And 15 years later, sold the business and had the great opportunity to join consultancy. And I think consultancy is great when you have a combination of perspectives amongst your team that allows clients, which are mostly law firms from around the world, to look at their issues and do a bit of a benchmark and try to establish a route that could get them slightly faster into where they want to get, but very much customized to who they are. So never forgetting about, their own identity, but also challenging their ways with ways that other law firms might be doing things. So I've been happily with Lexington Consultants now for 4.5 years, and I feel very, very privileged to be in this position.
Yeah, there's so much about what you said, especially the idea of arbitration. Let me ask you, what do you think arbitration has served you in your current work today? Is it the integration of multiple perspectives? Is it meeting people where they're at? Is it just that there's many different ways to resolve an issue? How do you think arbitration has informed your consultancy practice now?
Yeah, I think consultancy in my life in general terms, not to confuse arbitration with mediation.
Sure.
So the arbitration is the third party that has a power over those in dispute. Mediation has an extra challenge, and it's that you cannot tell them what to do. So it's what we call assisted negotiation. So aside of my work, I also teach, and I'm part of a business school, and one of the topics that I'm super passionate about is around negotiation. So it's all about communication. It's all about understanding and trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and then try to find common grounds. So in the business of law, as we were talking about, it is a business of people. Right. So the only way that you can assist in anything is just first being able to engage with those people and give them a reason to change if you're not even able to do that, there's nothing you can do. So in my job as a consultant, that has been extremely helpful. And of course, in my previous job as a CEO of a company, then you have all of the other issues you need to negotiate around.
Yeah,
so
totally. Let's today we're going to talk a little bit. The topic of today's conversation was around the art and science of really turning connections at events into clients, and it's a great topic. You know, I know there's so much more that we could even get into just in that topic. I want to start off before we get sort of into our three pillars that we're talking. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of putting yourself in other people's shoes in the event, in the context of events. And I think it might be just sort of a trite kind of like a anecdote, but you know, there's this idea that events are all around pitching yourself and putting yourself, making sure that everybody hears what you do. I've found that the best ways that events sort of tend to, or the best results, I'm not even knowing what I'm trying to say with results, but, you know, I've basically learned that the exact opposite is true. What's really the most important and tends to be really exciting is whenever you're able to jump into other people's presence. And I'm just trying to tie in your previous comment about putting yourself in other people's shoes with the idea of events. Do you sort of feel like that's the case? You know, do you think that that's a mindset about events that either you learn, but it's this idea of I'm going in there not to say anything about myself, but to learn as much about the room and learn as much about the collective. What do you think about that? Is that is there something there?
I mean, I mean, it's a very good point. I think events are mostly, the main aim is networking. And networking, you know, if we think about the word, is about expanding the net of contacts. So it's just you're expanding.
Right.
Now, what is interesting about events is that in every profession, and especially for lawyers, they sell themselves in the services. So there is that temptation to just always to be selling yourself. Now, for me, the first issue is what type of event are you going to and why? So why are you going where you're going? And secondly, who's going to be there? Because it's not the same how you treat everybody. Now, it could be that you have clients there, for instance. If you have clients, the relationship that you have with them will be extremely different to meeting people you've never met before. Now, if you're meeting clients, what I would always say is make sure that you give them some of your time. Even if you think you're going there to sell and you're already with them, you need to make sure that that relationship with them is as intense as it can be with anybody else. Intense in the sense of showing care and attention. So how are you? You have time, they're having a coffee, you see them by themselves, make sure that in a way you share the love with them. Then you have those that they might have been clients, but they're not anymore. And you might think they might never come back. So again, in that sense, it's almost like when you go to events, you have a set of different type of people that you might select them mentally, and you might, in a way, discriminate some from others, which is good to establish targets, but it's very important that you balance your time in the right way, making sure that you give everybody what you think might require at the time without overdoing it yourself. My feeling is that when you go with the mentality to sell, you're missing the point. Because what you're trying to do is, as you were saying, is engaging in order to see how people are. How are you? What's going on in your life? So for me, that is putting yourself in the shoes, basically.
Exactly. I want to, let's flip it and say authenticity. Now, this is a word that gets thrown around a lot. It's another sort of trite thing to say about the legal industry, that it can be conservative, very buttoned up. There's the perception that professionals can't be authentic because it reduces their professionality. I think a lot of that is changing, but it's still a long tail within the industry in that sense. At the same time, there is an overwhelming urge within clients to have deeper relationships with their law firms on a trusted advisor level. And you will hear this all time after time after time from clients, which is, I don't just want my work done. That's secondary to having a trusted advisor. And to that, I would say, how can you be a trusted advisor without being authentic? So there's a lot of paradox sort of wrapped up in this very high friction. And I think that's even more so in the context of events, because there's a high degree of, you're in a room with a lot of people. You might be surrounded by a lot of people, and every single human knows what it's like to say something just sort of bland versus say the thing that is not being said, or come in a way that really allows for the group to come together a little bit. Human beings know this very well. What do you have to say about the role of authenticity right now today, especially in the context of events, especially in the context of client aspirations for what they want out of their law firms?
I mean, my personal perspective is that, it's very easy to judge others, but I remember a conversation with one of my clients, and we were talking about how to position himself in a conference. And he said, my issue is that when I'm going to enter into that room and when I'm at the door about to open that room, I feel sick. So we need to be a bit more gentle in judging others on how people in a way interact, because some people are extroverts, some people are introverts. I think everybody tries to do their best. Some people have more skills socially and they navigate better in groups, and some people are more focused on one-to-ones. So the first thing I could say is that try to understand yourself first. Prepare yourself a bit. So make sure that in a way you are ready to what's coming up, so that when you plan that entrance, if you're somebody that are not going to feel comfortable entering into a big room and you don't know anybody, because it's not an easy thing to do. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it. It's like going out on stage.
Right.
So it's hard to say, be authentic, be yourself when you're on stage and you're nervous. Because nervous is when you then protect yourself. It's a natural thing to do. So in a way, what are the tactics that you can use in order to warm up and calm down? So is there anyone that in advance you can connect and try to meet and enter in twos or threes? Is there anyone alone in the room that you could go and just join in and then have a one-to-one instead of feeling lonely? There is always the lonely in the room. And you will do them a favor in the same way that you're doing yourself a favor. And then once you engage with conversations, there is this pressure of looking great, or, on trying to share your credentials straight away. And they say, hi, who are you? Where do you come from? And we've all been in situations when they ask you, for instance, where you come from. And if the country is not relevant to the other person that is talking to you, they just leave straight away, or if your law firm or your company. So I think it's kind of understanding that in these environments, many people will be very transactional. And it's fine. It's not that they have anything against you. It's just that they are transactional. I mean, some other people are more relationship focused. And you don't have to, in an extreme, be engaged with somebody that you see they might not have potential for you in your business all night just because you're comfortable. So you need to learn how to say goodbye in the same way that you need to be gentle in engaging in conversations with people that you might think they might not offer you business, but you never know. So be human is what I would say.
Yeah.
The authenticity aspect, I could give everybody their own time, their own space. And if you are comfortable, I understand that then you can bring your barriers down and be yourself. But my own personal perspective is that, I tend to navigate comfortably enough in the way that I am, so I find it fine. But I could not want to judge others if they're unable to do it straight away.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I'm trying to link up the idea of how you show up authentic versus meeting people where they're at. And of course, it's just, this is the human skill that we all have in some varying degree. And it's an art, effectively. But, I think what really resonated with me was the idea that, in some sense, coming with a plan is always maybe allows you to open up in a way. And I don't think a lot of us do come with a plan, right? So what you said, most important is what happens before you enter the room rather than once you're in the room. Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, I think that's the key element is that do not improvise.
Yeah.
So try to not improvise when you go to a conference. So everything requires a bit of a strategy. And nowadays, at Lexington, we use Nexl, and for me, Nexl is very useful. Why? Yeah. Because you go to a conference, you do your list in advance.
Yes.
You could have different options. One is to say, okay, if we want to demonstrate credentials, is there any specific way that we can do it? And many people organize a breakfast or do other things so that people that come to you, they already expect what they expect.
Yes.
There is other people that, whether they're clients or people you want to know, that generally you're able, because you might have the contacts, or if not, you find them, or you've seen the list of the conference and then you connect. If you connect in advance nowadays, and we see that, the IBA is coming soon. So one of the things that everybody now does is to make sure that you organize your one-to-ones during the days that you're there to make sure that the key targets, they're already connected. If they're busy, because you might find people that their priorities, because it could be a clash of priorities, is like, again, don't take it personally. Just allow people to just put whatever their priorities are in advance. But that doesn't mean you're not going to talk to them because they're there. You might see them around and you might grab them for a little while, say hello, and that's enough. That's absolutely enough, and that's fine. You don't have to close a sale. And that's the challenge. The people think during conferences they have to close sales. And during conferences, what you should try to do is just remind people that you exist, who you are, what do you do, if there is anything that might be relevant for them in the short term. And then is when you follow up, that is when you have to find a way to give it some shape.
Yes. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the idea of networking. And in some sense, if you zoom out, what you see is, yes, if you think of it, if you are the node, then all you think about is how many connections. But if you zoom out, what you see is a bunch of nodes that are all getting connected. And, you can sort of put yourself in how many engagements between different nodes am I sort of like having? And then, like you said, post-event, putting some shape into it. One of my favorite things is always trying to make an engagement, meet somebody where they're at, have a interesting anecdote that feels authentic from them, and then following up, reiterating that anecdote back to them, knowing that it was important to me that I sort of listen. And from there, the shape sort of comes together.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about messaging. Let's talk a little bit specifically, maybe the idea of how to show up let's take it into venues. The first is the idea of a pitch. There are certain places where sort of a pitch is appropriate, where you can speak to credentials, you can speak to the mission and vision of the firm, and you can speak specifically to sort of the results. Can you say a little bit about that idea in the context of something like an event, because it's not like it's never important. In some sense, people are there to really hear and assess sort of a situation in the event that there's a piece of work that they're thinking about talking about. So can you talk a little bit about that idea?
No, I think that the concept of the elevator pitch is key, because and I think it's almost literal during a conference. I mean, how many times you're in these hotels and you go up, oh, hi, you don't know that person. It's like, so what do you do?
That's right.
And you have 3 stops up the lift, and you actually need to say something so they'll remember you somehow. Yeah. Now, with law firms, it's interesting because it can, if you only focus on what the law firm does, it's hard to say something special that people will remember.
Sure.
Again, if you focus on the geography, that is what many people do.
Yes, right.
They might think it's not relevant. If you focus on the practice area, they might think it's another one. Yeah. So that's when, many people think quite carefully on, okay, what is that I can say that people will remember, what I do or who I am, or just remember me.
Yes. Right.
And again, it can be something almost personal. So, whether it's, my passion has always been to be X. I don't know if I've managed. So something that can be a bit humorous if necessary. But in a way, I think it's worthwhile to think through and prepare slightly, because that's something you have to be very quick at doing. And, some people are quick at improvising this type of things, but others might not.
Yes,
so I could suggest to do that. And again, not going on and on and on about, because people lose attention after 5 seconds.
Yes, totally. I whenever people ask me what Nexl does, I sometimes say, well, we're like an evolved CRM, and we do much more. We help collaboration between firms. That's fine, What I have learned so well is I tell a story about how whenever I was a very young junior lawyer, I went to a client meeting with a partner, and that partner basically started to say things that contradicted what an earlier partner had said at another meeting previously, and how the client was totally upset about 2 lawyers at the same law firm contradicting each other because they didn't know that they had spoken to one another. And everybody can resonate, because it's emotional, it's logical, you can put yourself in the room, and this highlights everything that we're effectively about, collaborating across relationships. And it really sort of says, so, that's just, I've said this so many times now, but, that's kind of the key to it all.
No, and sometimes it's a bit, for ourselves, generally what we tend to say, for instance, for Lexington is that, that we assist law firms to grow.
Sure.
But I feel that we end up almost being therapists, because you get close into what is their ambition, the vision, their worries, and you go so deep that it almost becomes medical. But at the end of the day, I think, again, is like, whatever is the connection,
yes, totally.
Whatever is the right moment, and don't make it heavy. I think in life we need to lighten up a bit and just.
That's right, totally. I agree. Let me ask you another side of the communication. So you really said what people should say about themselves, and I agree with you. Light, memorable, but with an impact. What about the other, which is asking good questions, being an active listener? Being, I dare to say, a little bit inquisitive in the ways that it's everybody will understand. Let's get real for a second. Let's talk seriously, because I'm interested in what you're having to say. And we're just between friends. If you can get to that moment, open up a little bit, and you're asking that question, and you're even prying, but prying in a fun way, in an interesting way. This is where real magic happens, or where real contact tends to happen. Can you say anything about question and active listening and the importance of that?
Yes. Again, that's kind of a general skill, and I think that is something we should do always. But in the course of a conference, again, what tends to happen is that if you're in a busy environment, people find it really difficult to be on the present with that one person, and they see everybody walking at the back.
Totally.
And you always see one eye going there, and then hi, and
right.
So I think the first thing that I could say is that if you are doing a one-to-one, try to find a corner that you're not going to be too distracted.
Yes.
Then secondly is always the warm-up. I mean, you've done it very well when we started, and we had a really nice conversation. We didn't know each other, so it was important for us to find that, connection before we start into the, serious stuff.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, it is the same. It's just lighten up, warm up, and just once we get into that, it's like the open questions. Yeah. So tell me a bit about your firm, tell me a bit about yourself. Now, I think that in questioning, it's important to be generous. First, allow people to speak, then listen. And then when you respond, you're not just talking in isolation, but you are really taking the information they've given you to a different level and find your connections. Yes. So if they're telling you about, growth of the law firm and open up in different markets, and they told that they're opening, I don't know, in Central America and doing, a regional firm, then you can say, interesting, I had certain experiences in, in opening, expanding firms regionally. I found there is X or Y challenges. Yes. What do you think? And then you go back, and then slowly you go into a bit more detailed conversation to try to identify what might be the challenge that they're having. Now, in this case, in a way, from Lexington Consultants, from our perspective, we're selling services to them for the job that they're doing. Between law firms themselves is interesting because they all want the other one to buy from each other. So it's not one buy and the other sell. It's both sell, both buy.
Yeah, that's right.
So that can create a bit of an imbalance, unless it's a jurisdiction that has more opportunities to do the outbound and the other the inbound, and you're able to observe that. But what I could say is be careful with the inbound jurisdiction law firms that they don't get to how to say, confident in thinking that they are always the ones that buy.
Sure, right.
Because otherwise they might be a bit condescending with other smaller jurisdictions where they think they're not relevant to them and they're more important. And so balancing the conversation, and it's a give and take. So I'll ask you some things, but I could like you to ask me too, and then we can exchange information. Yes, and that's what is really hard to find in conversations, amongst law firms sometimes. And even to get into business is not that easy. I think they struggle many times to get into business, and they get a bit superficial. They don't get into the issues themselves, and then they move on. So they miss out on opportunities. Yes, but I think when you give space to people, I mean, the conversations that I had in conferences halls, they're so profound, and they can be very, very real. So I think it's worthwhile to give it a go.
We're both going to be at the IBA, and you just described the entire space of the IBA. Small, profound relationships, deep friendships, all the way to complete two ships passing in the night simultaneously happening. Very interesting. The network nodes are not all the same, and the messages are different. So very interesting. We have only a couple minutes left. I've taken so much of your time, but you've been so very generous. I want to end with something that is arguably incredibly vital, but sometimes missed, which is the post-event sort of follow-up and the post-event wrap-up. Arguably, turning connections into clients happens not at an event, but after an event. It's in the same way that somebody once told me, all clients are made between matters. If you solve one problem for a person, that person is not a client. They turn into a client after you've solved that problem for them. And if they come back and they serve you a second part, then you can consider them a client. It's always resonated. It's always resonated with me. Talk a little bit maybe about the idea of the post-event follow-up. We've sprinkled at it. You get something interesting. It gets mirrored back in the post-event. There's the idea of what do I say if we didn't initially decide on what to do. There's no matter there, or there's no referral there. How do I continue to engage in a way that's thoughtful? There's so much to this. So many people at their keyboards right now just wondering, what do I say to that person, after it? And how long is too long? Is 1 month weird? Is 3 months weird? So many interesting questions. Yes.
No, I mean, it's interesting because, sometimes I'm seconded in some law firms, and I remember a lawyer that, could send a draft email to me. Do you think that's right? Do you think so? People get very panicky about, how to do a follow up. So it's a very, very good question. And I think, again, it goes back to being systematic. And here is the formal with the informal. I think it has to be the right balance. If you start at the very beginning, understanding that, it is a conference, you're going to connect with many interesting people, and everyone is going to be very different. So treat everybody uniquely.
Right.
The standardized element is the thing that offends people the most.
Yes, right.
So what I could say is that let's kill that as much as we can. So it's not about amounts of people, it's about quality of connections that then you can give them what they require. So what I could say is that, number one, every single person that you've met, after you meet, make sure that you take your notes. And I think in this case, all these IT, CRMs that we have, they're crucial. So put all the comments there on the key elements to remember that person and the conversations, and 3 bullet points. Then the next day, at the latest, I could say, it was lovely to meet you, nothing else. That's what I could do, because people have given you time. And then if there is any follow-up to do in that same email, I'll follow up when I come back, and then you'll tell them if they're expecting anything from you. If they're not expecting anything from you, it could be that later on, with more calm time, just to take some of the conversation and then say X, Y, or Z was really interesting, and I would like to discuss that more in depth. If you have time, is it okay to reconnect on Zoom? I mean, we have a tool nowadays, Zoom and Teams and everything else. So don't underestimate the potential of re-meeting again with those that you think that there is something else that you could have discussed. Now, with the rest of the people, once you've said thank you, if you feel that there is not much more extra to say, I think generally nowadays, whether it's law firms or consultancy or whatever, they have the communication tools. So what I would say is, if there's been any key topic that you've discussed, to say, I understand that X, Y, and Z is interesting for you. Could you be okay if I put you on the list of distribution of these topics from my firm? And then ask for permission so that you personally make the effort to connect them to information that you hope will be relevant to them. Now, there is a tool that is very interesting, at least with Nexl, that is like, every X amount of time to reconnect with people. And those notifications are very helpful. But worst of the worst, you always go back to the same conference, which I think is very important. And then once a year, these are people that you say, hi, you're going to be back again. And that is another way of, humanizing these connections that you had.
Yes, right. Totally. Let me ask you one last question in the same vein, which is the idea of a social media presence and a social media identity, and something that says to people, I want to follow with you because I use this as a medium, and this is the way I communicate to many people at the same time. And what you're going to get what you're going to get is not, we closed X client, X piece of work. What you're going to get is, I'm going to say, and I'm going to check in on terms of what I'm thinking on a daily basis. I have found that, to put it bluntly, there's this one-to-many, one-to-one relationship that is so hard to contextualize, so hard to metric, but it is no surprise to anybody. You just have to look at yourself. LinkedIn is, for many, a top 3 tool that they use now to stay in connection, to fill their world with a communication of people in and around them. Do you have something to say about this tool and this idea of a social media identity with the intent of staying in one-to-many communication with people?
I think for law firms, for instance, is important to establish what is their social media identity as a firm.
Sure.
And then each of the lawyers as well to establish this social media as part of their communication to a community. But still you're aware that you're communicating to a community.
Sure.
So LinkedIn is a professional platform, which it gives you great opportunities. It gives opportunities for lawyers to have a bit of profiling through their law firm at the same time that in a personal level. Now, I think nowadays is very, very important that everyone works very strongly on, who or what type of message is the one that they're transmitting on LinkedIn, what is that they're saying, how they're positioning themselves. And in the same way, we've discussed before about YouTube and, when people talk and when you listen to people talking, you already feel that you know them a little bit more.
Yes, totally.
So I think because we're trying to get people, if you are selling your own services, you could like people to just find out about you. And because you cannot meet the whole world at once, these platforms allows you to just say something. And there is, kind of, without meeting anybody, we all in a way find whether we like or we don't like the way that they communicate. So that initial profiling, you can already do it online. And I always think that, you have to find in clients the right match for you too. So we're not all for everyone. So we self-select each other through all of this, media. So, but it's going back to your authenticity. Like some people might say, okay, let's just stage it. Let's make it perfect. Now, make it as perfect as you can, but don't really miss out on who you are, because people will end up seeing it through and it leaks. And if you're going to be pretending, then people are not going to build that trust that we said from the beginning, that is the aim that we need to do.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. I think the course of the conversation has really had 2 pillars. On the one hand, we've really hit the art of sort of what we're talking about. It really feels like sometimes we're just creatively talking and it's emerging. At the other end, there's things that are so systemic, follow-ups, pitches, knowing how you enter the room, having a list of people to focus. So it's this beautiful art and science that comes together that really is, I think, business in a nutshell, right? A combination of these 2 things, or even growth in a nutshell really is a function of this art and science together. the irony of all of this is you and I are probably going to meet. I believe you're going to be at IBA, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Paris, yeah.
In Paris.
I'm very much looking forward to meeting you, Ben.
Exactly. So the irony is we're talking about it. So, of course, you will be on my list to meet, and I will have that on Nexl.
Me
and
too.
There will be a follow-up. Yes, exactly.
I will find you.
Yes, we're going to find each other, and we're going to use what we just talked about with each other. So it's going to be fantastic. A little bit of a meta conversation that we're going to have in the context of meeting one another. So I look forward very much to talking with you. Besides that, what else is happening? What's the rest of the year? Anything else exciting for both you personally or for Lexington? Yeah.
Wow, the rest of the year. So the years go far too fast.
I know. Every single time I go to bed, I can't believe that it's another day.
Yes. So I almost feel that we're at Christmas and we're just finishing the summer. Totally. So much going on, but very exciting.
Yeah.
We've been in Brazil, in Denmark, Switzerland, India, so Spain, Portugal.
Yeah.
So traveling the world and just understanding the business of law, that is what we're really passionate about. So, and as much as we can share. So, and London, I mean, for me, London is extremely, energizing. So
totally.
Very exciting year ahead.
Yes, very exciting year ahead. Okay, well, I think we're going to close the space here. I've taken so much of your time, but you are so very grateful. Mari Cruz,
it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody. If you like this episode, like it, tell me in the comments, communicate with me on social media, all of this kind of thing. And we will see you very, very soon. Check out the other great episodes that we have done. So many interesting conversations. I've recorded just 2 this week with William Washington, the CFO at Baker McKenzie. That was a fantastic episode on being an introvert in a very extroverted business world. And I want to thank all the guests, and especially Mari Cruz. Thank you so much for all the time. So that's it. We'll close the space today. Take care, everybody. Bye.